Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the InnerViews. In today's video, we're going to briefly break down the key tactical theme in today's Community Shield clash between Arsenal and Liverpool. When we break down the game and we do look at the board, we have Liverpool in a 4-3-3, and we ended up seeing Arsenal shift between a 3-4-3 and a 4-3-3. So when we break down the game, obviously the key tactical theme was how Arsenal would look to disrupt Liverpool from creating chances. And what we end up seeing is that Arsenal were in that 3-4-3, and they ended up having Nketiah stepping into the path of Firmino, and then they had Saka and Aubameyang ahead of the two Liverpool center backs, but blocking off the passing lane in towards Williams and Robertson. So you would see Saka in particular stepping out into the path of Robertson. What we also ended up seeing was that Nketiah would leave Firmino at times to step into the path of Van Dijk or Alisson, and although he was blocking off the passing lane in towards Firmino, we would see Elneny or Xhaka step in towards his path. When you look across the pitch in that midfield zone, you do have Xhaka and Elneny stepping into the path of Milner and Wijnaldum, so that forced Liverpool to adjust their movement in and around those central areas. Milner in particular was dropping off into wider areas or to the left of Van Dijk to form a back three, and that would force Arsenal pressure towards him. Ultimately, for Arsenal, it never really shifted their defensive shape, and what they simply did was that they had Saka stepping into the path of Milner, they pushed Bellerin higher to step out into the path of Robertson, and then they had Holding shifting across to close down Mane higher up the pitch. Ultimately, when you look at how Arsenal were looking to press from the front, they had the wingbacks stepping out into the path of Robertson and Williams if the ball did bypass Saka and Aubameyang. The other alternative that we witnessed from Arsenal when Milner shifted to the left of Van Dijk witnessed Saka stepping out into the path of Milner and blocking off the passing lane into Robertson, and Xhaka stepping over into the path of Firmino to ensure that he couldn't get on the ball. If Arsenal dropped off deeper in that 5-4-1, then they would keep the midfield bank narrow and they would look to block off passing lanes into Firmino by keeping Xhaka and Elneny tight, and ultimately they had a back five to ensure that Liverpool's front three couldn't get on the ball in free space. That meant that Holding would stick to Mane. You would have Salah being monitored by Tierney or Maitland-Niles shifting across narrow. And then we would see David Luiz tracking the movement of Firmino, which ultimately forced Firmino into that midfield zone. So the other key tactical theme did occur when Arsenal shifted into this 4-3-3, and what we ended up witnessing was that Liverpool didn't have an answer for Maitland-Niles' movement going forward, and what we ended up seeing down that left-hand side was that when Maitland-Niles did push forward, Fabinho never picked him up, and what we ended up seeing him do was that he positioned himself ahead of Joe Gomez and Williams, and that created an overload down that left-hand side for Aubameyang to break in behind. What we would also see was that if Aubameyang shifted towards the left touchline, then that would drag out Williams, and Maitland-Niles would look to break into space in that left channel. If we look to a few examples, we could see Xhaka having space in those deeper positions to get on the ball. One ended up seeing Aubameyang receive the ball towards the left touchline, and as he pulled Williams and Salah towards him, you ended up witnessing Tierney making an overlapping run and no one tracking the movement of Maitland-Niles, which ended up seeing them combine. But when Maitland-Niles broke freely into the box to receive the pass from Tierney, he played it into Nketiah, who didn't test Alisson. And if we look to another example, once again, it's Aubameyang receiving a Xhaka diagonal ball out on that left touchline, which does pull out Williams and Salah. And once again, you end up witnessing Maitland-Niles running off Wijnaldum, breaking freely into left half space to receive a reverse pass, but his cross doesn't connect with any of his teammates. Ultimately, when you break down Arsenal's opener, it does follow a similar theme where Liverpool do struggle to deal with that overload, but it also exploits their pressing, because when they look to press from the front, obviously they have the front three pressing the center backs and the goalkeeper, but what you end up seeing was that they push Milner and Wijnaldum higher up the pitch. And while they're tasked with stepping into the path of Elneny and Xhaka, that does leave space out in the wider areas for Bellerin and Tierney to get on the ball. Robertson can't step forward, and neither can Williams due to the positioning of Saka and Aubameyang. So when those balls are played forward, if those Arsenal fullbacks are able to bypass the Liverpool fullbacks, then that puts Saka and Aubameyang in a position to run at that Liverpool backline. Obviously, you do want Fabinho to shift over to provide cover, but that wasn't happening. And when you look to the build-up to Arsenal's opening goal, you end up seeing Robertson being bypassed, and then that allows Saka to run at Van Dijk with Fabinho eventually shifting over. What you end up seeing on that left-hand side is Aubameyang ready to get himself into a 1v1 situation with Williams, and you have Nketiah darting across that forward line to drag out Gomez. When Saka is able to switch play out to Aubameyang, you have Tierney making an overlapping run, and then you also have Maitland-Niles making an underlapping run to drag out Wijnaldum to ensure that he can't provide cover for Williams to deal with Aubameyang. And the other chances that Arsenal created in that opening half simply stemmed from Liverpool mistakes. You can look to the time where Wijnaldum tried to replicate Milner's positioning by dropping off to the right of Gomez to get on the ball. And when he played the ball back to Gomez, was Nketiah stepping into his path to win the ball and then poke it across Fabinho into the path of Xhaka running at the Liverpool backline. And when Xhaka runs at the Liverpool backline, he slides the ball into right half space for Saka, who locates Nketiah running off Fabinho, and Saka splits Van Dijk and Gomez to find Nketiah breaking freely towards the box, but he forces Alisson into a low save. And the other opportunity witnessed Elneny pressed by Wijnaldum, sliding the ball to Saka, dropping off of Van Dijk to get on the ball. Again, Fabinho isn't in sight, and Saka is able to run at that Liverpool defense and split Van Dijk and Fabinho to find Nketiah darting between Gomez and Williams. And Williams can't help out Gomez because of Maitland-Niles' forward movement. But when Nketiah receives that ball towards the edge of the box, he ends up falling back and bending his effort over the net. However, Liverpool were able to create chances in that opening half, and while some of them did stem through Milner's late runs into the box that weren't tracked by the Arsenal midfield, their main tactical threat did stem through Andy Robertson, who was able to push forward down that left channel due to the fact that eventually Saka wasn't tracking his runs. If we look to one example, we witnessed Robertson breaking into Arsenal's third after intercepting a pass into Bellerin, and he locates Salah looking to dart off of Tierney, and as he pushes forward, he eventually tries to play that pass into Salah, but Tierney does a very good job of intercepting it. Later on in that half, you have Robertson pushing into Arsenal's third, and he plays a pass to Mane and then runs off Saka towards that byline. What we end up seeing is that Mane splits Bellerin and Saka to find Firmino shifting laterally to drag out Holding, and Firmino tries to play a quick 1-2 with Mane, who is blocked off by Bellerin, but it falls into the path of Robertson, breaking into left half space, and his fizz low cross is pushed away by Martinez. There was the time where Milner simply poked the ball into his path, and Robertson delivered a dangerous ball through that 6-yard box that nearly met Salah. Minutes later, we witnessed Salah ahead of Tierney and Xhaka, and he cut across them both to locate the run of Robertson running off Saka into left half space. But when Robertson received the ball, his pullback was cleared by Bellerin. And the final example ended up seeing Arsenal fail to clear their lines and Fabinho sliding the ball out back to Robertson ahead of Saka. He located Mane getting across Holding, and he delivered that ball into the box, and Mane ended up flicking it towards the back post for Van Dijk running off David Luiz, but he couldn't direct that ball on goal. And when we look to the second half, the game followed a similar theme. That ultimately led to both managers turning to their bench. Cedric replaced Bellerin, and we ended up seeing Liverpool shift to a 4-2-3-1 with Minamino and Naby Keita coming onto the pitch. When we look at that 4-2-3-1, it did see Mane shift out to the right, and he was predominantly ahead of Maitland-Niles. And we ended up seeing Minamino adopt a similar position to Mane just ahead of Holding. Robertson and Williams were pushing forward to peg back the Arsenal wide players, and we ended up seeing Salah and Firmino swap positions around that central area. They were dropping off a bit deeper. There were times where they were pushed high towards the last shoulder, and ultimately Liverpool's equalizer stemmed through tight, intricate play and a few lucky bounces that ended up falling to Minamino to equalize. Hi everybody, thanks for watching, and subscribe here for your latest tactical analysis and daily commentary on the InnerViews show. And if that wasn't enough, don't forget you could find more organic, unfiltered soccer/football analysis on the InnerViews podcast, the best soccer/football podcast in the world, available on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and any Android apps on your Android devices.